What retirement plan options should small business owners consider? Do the options change if you have employees? And what are the contribution limits for small business retirement plans? We'll answer these questions and more on this, the 131st episode of the DoughRoller Podcast.
Welcome to the DoughRoller Podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a great day. Have an interesting show for you today. Have a guest on the show from Fidelity, and the topic is small business retirement plans. Brian Hogan, who is, as I said, an employee of Fidelity, and he's a director that oversees their small business retirement plans there at Fidelity. And so I thought, well, who better to bring on the show to talk about the options? This came up because of a number of readers had emailed me that have small businesses. In a lot of cases, it's similar to my situation, where you have a side business or you do some freelance work, but you also have a day job. So you have a 401k at work, and so you're wondering, well, what are my options there? Does that limit my options? Does that affect my contributions? And then just generally, what are the pros and cons of the different types of small business retirement plans? And one of the things that kind of surprised me about this interview, which we'll get to here in just a second, was how simple it was. I mean, there are a handful of options, not many, but there are a few options, and there are definitely some advantages and disadvantages depending on things like whether you have employees or not. Certainly, your contributions can be affected if you have a day job. Even your age. Are you 50 or older and have that catch-up contribution available to you? That could affect which plan you choose. How much your company makes, and as a result, how much can you contribute? That can be a factor. So a lot of factors, but at the end of the day, the analysis really isn't that difficult. And I think Brian did a good job of sort of walking us through the options and the pros and cons to each. I can tell you that I've had a SEP IRA, which is one of the options you'll hear about. I've had a SEP IRA since 2010, and I've been very happy with it. It was at Scottrade initially, and then moved it over to Vanguard. Actually was very happy with Scottrade, but moved it to Vanguard. I wanted to simplify our finances, including the number of accounts that we had, mainly for the benefit of my wife, and so moved it to Vanguard. And actually am now seriously considering transferring it all into a self-employed 401k so that I can do a backdoor Roth IRA. And so that's a whole nother topic. But if you have all of this pre-tax money in an IRA, and then you contribute on an after-tax basis to an IRA and want to convert it to a Roth, you can't just pick and choose which IRAs you're converting. The IRS looks at all of your IRAs and then takes a pro rata basis, figures out how much of the conversion was pre-tax and after-tax. Anyway, the long and short of that is I need to get my pre-tax money out of my SEP IRA and into an individual 401k. So I'll likely be doing that. That's just another factor to consider. It's an important decision. But as I said, Brian did a good job of walking us through it, and at the end of the day, really not that complicated. So I'm going to turn right to the interview. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob.
Hey, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. I'm sure you're quite busy at Fidelity, but have had a lot of questions from folks about small business retirement plans, and so I wanted to cover that with you, and I understand that's what you do. So why don't you sort of describe for us just who you are and what you do at Fidelity?
Sure. So my name's Brian Hogan, and I am the Director of Small Business Retirement Products here at Fidelity Investments. I am responsible for our SEP IRA, Simple IRA, and our self-employed 401k, as well as our investment-only plan. And really my job as a product manager involves everything from marketing to operations to service models to making sure that our plans are compliant with everything that comes down legislatively.
Okay. How long have you been at Fidelity?
I've been with Fidelity for 16 years.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's great. And I'm sorry, where are you located?
I am in Smithfield, Rhode Island.
Okay. Good. I actually spent a summer at Brown University, so I've had my share of time in Providence.
Okay.
You mentioned SEP IRAs. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about those, and simple IRAs, and then sort of individual 401ks. Did you also mention something called an investment-only plan?
Yes.
What is? I've never heard of that. What is that?
Well, it's really our answer to a small market 401k. So because we don't have a 401k plan for small business owners, generally what we'll do is we'll tell a small business owner they should get a TPA, third-party administrator, and then they can use Fidelity as the investment platform.
Ah, okay. Very good. All right. Well, I'm sure we'll come back to all of those. What I thought we'd do today is kind of start with the simplest scenario and then add complications to it. Okay. And so, Brian, as a starting point, let's talk about the person who has their own business, no employees. Maybe they're a professional. Maybe it's just a side gig, but they have this income from their business. What are their retirement plan options? Let's just start with that. What are the options that are available to them to save for retirement?
Yeah, so there's really, for a sole proprietor like that single person, it's really the SEP IRA, the self-employed 401k, and the simple IRA. Each one of them with their own unique benefits. The simple IRA looks more like a 401k plan, but the contribution limits are lower than they would be for a SEP IRA or a self-employed 401k. So you very rarely see a sole proprietor opening a simple IRA. The strongest choices or the best options for a sole proprietor would be the self-employed 401k or the SEP IRA.
Okay.
Both having higher contribution limits, $53,000 for each of them. The decision as to which one to go for a small business owner really comes down to how much administrative work do they want to do. There's a little bit more administrative work with a self-employed 401k. Once the assets reach a certain threshold, there's 5,500 reporting. Whereas with a SEP IRA, it's really just that, an IRA, and there's no complicated testing and reporting that has to be done.
Okay, so
it's just your IRA.
So for the SEP IRA and also the self-employed 401k, the contribution, the amount that someone can contribute is the same. I think you said, I think it's $53,000. Is that for 2014?
That's for 2015.
2015, okay. But you said there's a little more paperwork with a 401k. If that's the case, why would anyone pick the 401k option?
The advantage for a 401k option would be for, say, a client who's making $100,000. They can max out their SEP IRA at 25% of compensation, which would only be $25,000. But if they went with a 401k option, they could still put in that 25%, but then in addition, you can do a payroll deduction or an employee contribution up to $17,500.
Okay.
So at lower incomes, you may be able to put more into a self-employed 401k than a SEP IRA.
All right, and that's a good point. So these contribution limits, you mentioned $53,000. I take it the way it works. Take the SEP IRA, for example. The contribution limit in 2015 will be $53,000 or 25% of your profit, whichever is lower.
Right.
Okay. So if you make $53,000 in side income, you can't take it all and stick it in a SEP IRA or a 401k.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
So there's sort of two requirements. You've got that cap of $53,000, but it can't be more than 25% of your income. So I take it then if someone were to choose the 401k option, perhaps for the reason you just described, a couple questions come to mind. The first is, if they're 50 or older, do they still get that catch-up contribution as well for these types of small business 401ks?
They do.
Okay. So that could be, but they don't get it with the SEP IRA. Am I right about that?
Right. There's no catch-up contributions in a SEP IRA.
Okay. So if you're 50 or better, as I like to say, if you're 50 or older, that might be another reason to consider a 401k as opposed to the SEP IRA.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we're going to kind of talk a little bit more in a minute. Well, maybe we just talk about it now. So a lot of folks that have self-employed income also have a day job. Maybe they do some freelance work on the side, but they're a W-2 employee. They have a 401k at work. if they're contributing, if we assume that they're maxing out their 401k at work, does that affect their contribution limits for their SEP IRA or their self-employed 401k for their side business?
It does. There's one what we call 402G limit as to how much a person can contribute. So if they're maxing out their 401k at work, their 402G limit of $53,000 for 2015 would be reduced by whatever they put into their 401k at work.
I see. Would the same be true with the SEP IRA?
Yes.
Now, see, I have to tell you, Brian, I've heard this two different ways. I've heard that the contributions at work into a 401k do reduce, in this case, the $53,000 limit. But I've also heard from a number of sources that they do not. And this has been actually, I confess, an area of frustration for myself. So you mentioned for the individual, let's kind of break it down. You mentioned for the individual, for the 401k option, you've got the $53,000 limit, which is your max limit. But if you don't make enough income from your self-employed work, that 25% rule, you won't be able to put it all in, but you could do an employee contribution of up to $17,500.
Right.
But what I've heard is if you also have a day job and you contribute to the 401k at your work, say you max out, that would eliminate your ability to contribute the employee contribution piece of your 401k for your side business. Let me just stop there. That absolutely is correct, right?
That is correct, yes. If you've maxed out to your $17,500 employee contribution, you would not have the ability to make an employee contribution into your self-employed 401k.
And that's true. You could have 5 different jobs with 5 different 401ks. Your limit is still $17,500 in the aggregate.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So whether it's your self-employed income, or maybe you have 2-3 jobs. But now, what about the $53,000, the 25% of your profits? Can you still contribute 25% of your profits up to the $53,000 limit in a 401k or a SEP IRA?
Yes, but it is in aggregate, same as it is with the 401k.
I see. But now, don't they? And I feel like, Brian, I feel like I'm arguing with you, and I know you're the expert. So please forgive. It's the lawyer in me. I can't help myself. I'd understood that there was there's certainly an employee contribution limit, which is what we've been talking about. There's also an employer limit, right? That's the $53,000.
Right.
But I've understood them to be two different things. So there is an employee limit, and that follows you no matter how many jobs you have. But for example, I've heard if you have two full-time jobs, they're totally independent of one another. There's no common ownership in the companies, and your employers just want to give you 25% of your income in a 401k up to $53,000. That they can do that. Is that not true?
They can, but again, it's an aggregate limit. So if you've got 2 separate companies, you can't put more than $53,000 into your SEP for 1 year.
I see. Okay. So I guess the long and short of it is if you are working a day job and you're contributing to a 401k, you absolutely have to factor that into it when you figure out your contributions into either a SEP IRA or a self-employed 401k.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Should your day job and the 401k you have there affect which option you choose for your self-employed income? That is, between a SEP IRA or a 401k?
I mean, it depends on a lot of things. Like, are you maximizing your contributions at your day job? Is your employer matching anything at your day job? And then after you answer those questions, then you have to figure out what makes more sense. Do I want to go, for lack of a better term, easy and just do a SEP IRA, or is the self-employed 401k more advantageous because I haven't reached my $17,500 limit in my day job?
Right. You mentioned the extra paperwork for the 401k. So does Fidelity offers a SEP IRA, right?
Yes.
And did you say, does Fidelity offer an individual or a self-employed 401k, or they don't?
We do.
Okay.
Yes.
Are the fees, not the investing fees? Obviously, there are fees for whatever mutual fund or ETF you might choose to invest in. But are there account management fees for either the SEP IRA or the self-employed 401k?
No, there are no account setup fees and no annual maintenance fees for either account.
So cost wouldn't be a deciding factor, at least if folks chose to use Fidelity.
Right.
All right.
Correct.
So before we kind of move to the next layer of complication, you mentioned the simple IRA. You said the contribution limits are lower. What are they for a simple IRA?
For 2015, it's $12,000.
Right. And why would anyone pick that?
Well, what we've seen, you'll find a lot of blue-collar small businesses, landscape companies, auto body shops. It's generally for the simple IRA really makes more sense for smaller companies with employees that want their employees to be able to contribute.
Okay. Well, that's actually a good segue because that was my next layer of complication. Although,
Yes.
real quick before we get there, are there Roth options? Can you open a Roth SEP IRA or a Roth self-employed 401k?
The Roth self-employed 401k contributions are allowed. However, we don't offer them here at Fidelity. There is no Roth option with the SEP or the simple IRA.
Okay. Well, I'm curious why Fidelity doesn't offer that. Have you just not seen a demand for it?
We haven't. It's a lot of work administratively to record keep the Roth contributions, and we really haven't seen the demand for it.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, let's move to the next sort of complication. You alluded to it with the simple IRA. Let's think about a business where maybe it's not a large business, but they've got 3 or 4 or 5 or maybe 10 employees. Let's start again with just the list. Are there options? What are their options? Are they the same, the SEP IRA, 401k, and simple IRA, or are there other options that folks should consider?
Yeah, it really is the same 3 options: the SEP IRA, the simple IRA, and the 401k plan.
Okay. So walk us through, with you have employees, does that change the analysis that someone should go through to figure out what's best for their company?
Yeah, so the first question is, for the owner of the company is how much are they going to put away? Do they want to maximize their contributions? The second question would be, do you want your employees to be able to contribute to the plan? So, for example, for a SEP IRA, if you've got 5 employees and you decide that you're going to put away 25% of your own compensation for yourself as the owner, you also have to put away 25% of each employee's compensation on their behalf.
Okay. And I'm sorry, for which plans does that apply, or does that apply to all of them?
That's the SEP IRA.
The SEP IRA, okay. So whatever employee and with the SEP IRA, they're all considered employee contributions. Is that right, or can employees also contribute to a SEP IRA?
No, they're all employer contributions.
So if you set up a SEP IRA, whatever percentage of your income, you being the owner, up to 25%, I guess you've got to give the same percentage to your employees.
That's correct.
Now, before we go to the next ones, is there any limits on that in terms of how many hours the employee works or how long they've worked for you?
You can basically write it in. You can design your own plan as you see fit. With the government 5498, 5305 form, there are no limits.
Okay. I see. Because one of the questions I get is, well, what if an employee, I've heard that if an employee hasn't been there a year, for example, you can have a plan that would not contribute to their a retirement plan for them, or if they work fewer than 1,000 hours. Does that not apply, or is that maybe a different plan?
That's the simple IRA.
Okay, we'll get there. All right, so you fair enough. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, so you've described the SEP IRA for us. So should we go right to the simple IRA?
Sure. So the simple IRA, again, it looks and feels like a 401k plan. So the employees can make payroll deduction contributions, employee contributions, and then the employer can choose to match those contributions up to 3% of compensation.
I see. And you mentioned, so is the simple IRA what you see to be the most popular option for folks, for small businesses?
I won't say the most popular, but I would say probably the best option for 4 to 5 employees. I think just because of the publicity that 401ks get, most small business owners, that's what they've heard of as a 401k. They've never heard of a simple IRA. So when they go out and look for a retirement plan, they automatically think 401k plan.
And what are the advantages? I'm sorry?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of small businesses end up in a 401k plan that they can't afford.
And explain that to me. I mean, what are the differences between the simple IRA and a 401k, and why would a small business be unable to afford a 401k?
For a simple IRA, the majority, we charge a $350 plan fee here at Fidelity, but that's it. That's the only fee associated, other than the fees on the investments. But with a 401k plan, you're going to pay a lot more in administrative fees for testing, for loans, for any other features that you add to a 401k plan, which you may not necessarily need for such a small company.
I gotcha. So the 401k plan, again, this is for small businesses with employees, can end up being a lot more expensive.
Exactly.
Right. Now,
if you've got a collection of doctors or lawyers who are higher income and want to do certain things in their retirement plan, a 401k may make more sense because it may be worth the money to pay for those extra features.
Yeah.
But for your average mom and pop shop with just 4 or 5 employees, the simple IRA makes a lot more sense.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense. I take it though with the simple IRA, one of the am I correct though that would also limit the amount of money that the owner could put away for retirement?
Yes, it does.
And I think you said earlier the total limit is $12,000. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Right. So, I guess it's with everything there's pros and cons. So obviously fees are less, but your limits are less too. One plan we've not talked about is a defined benefit plan. Is that something that Fidelity offers to small businesses?
We don't actively sell small defined benefit plans anymore.
Okay. All right. Well, then maybe we'll put that issue off. I can address that another. That's one of the things I've looked at extensively for myself, but have been too scared to pull the trigger on it because there's a lot more requirements. It's not as simple as just deciding how much you want to put away each year. Okay, well, this has been very helpful. So we've got the SEP IRA, the self-employed 401k, the simple IRA. It sounds like just kind of summarize, if you're a solo, if you're by yourself with no employees, it sounds like it's either going to be the SEP IRA or the self-employed 401k.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. And there could be some reasons for the 401k, particularly if you don't, it may allow you to contribute more on the employee side. And also if you're 50 or older, but you've also got to be mindful of any retirement contributions you make at a job where you're maybe a W-2 employee.
Right.
Okay. And then when you start to have employees, that's when the simple IRA starts to look a little more attractive because it's simple and it's not as expensive as a 401k.
Right.
Is there a limit to the number of employees you can have and still use a simple IRA?
Simple IRA is 100 employees.
Okay, so once you get above 100, which I'm not so sure I'd call that a small business anymore, but I guess it is, you'd be looking at a 401k for the most part?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's been very helpful because it's a framework that I've just never focused on. I've always had a SEP IRA. One of the things I'm thinking about going to a 401k, switching to a 401k, is because I want to do a backdoor Roth, and I can't do it with all of this pre-tax money in IRA accounts.
Right.
So that's maybe another factor for some folks, but it's been very helpful to sort of frame this out for me and know what the options are. And so I appreciate that. Anything that we're missing? Anything else we should have covered on these retirement plans that would help folks, make that final decision as to what's best for them?
No, I think again, the important parts are how much does the business owner want to contribute on their own? Do they want their employees to be able to contribute if they have any? And really, what's your goal? Is it maximizing your contributions or reducing your paperwork, less administrative burden?
Right. On the 401k, who does the paperwork? I mean, if someone opens it up at Fidelity, does Fidelity help them with that paperwork, or is the business owner, does he or she go out and get a tax accountant to do that kind of work?
Yeah, they would, here at Fidelity, they'd have to go out and get a tax accountant to do that work.
Okay. So that would be an added cost for the 401k. Well, that's good to know. All right, good. Well, Brian, listen, I appreciate your time so much today and your information on these retirement plans.
No problem. Thank you for your time.
Well, there you go. Hope you enjoyed hearing from Brian. If you have any questions, obviously you can send me an email, dr@doughrroller.net. I'm happy to forward them on to Brian or try to address them myself. It's interesting, this whole topic about how workplace contributions to a 401k affect the max contribution you can make in a SEP IRA or a self-employed 401k. My only suggestion there, and if you've been a long-time listener to this show, you know I've had an issue with this very topic. I'm pretty confident that I know the right answer, but I am not a tax professional. So if that's an issue for you, you want to max out, say, a SEP IRA at $50,000+ and you contribute to a 401k and you're wondering if one affects the other, I highly recommend you seek the advice of a very good tax accountant. That would be my suggestion to you on that score. It's interesting. What originally got me down that path that maybe I had been under contributing to my SEP IRA was a discussion with someone at Fidelity, interestingly enough, not for this show, but in a discussion with the folks at Fidelity about possibly opening up an individual or self-employed 401k. But if you're confronting that issue, I highly recommend you get advice from a tax accountant. But of course, on anything else, you've got questions or whatever, don't hesitate to shoot me an email. Again, dr@doughrroller.net. Love to hear from you. As you know, I read every single email I get, and I respond to every single email as well. Hey, hope you have a great day. Until next time, remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.